Any others? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
Don't move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the September 17th board meeting minutes. Would anybody like to make any adjustments to those minutes? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to approve those?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. Public comment period. So at each of our meetings, we set aside 15 minutes for people to comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. And would anyone like to take advantage of that 15 minutes? Yeah, if you would just come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and let us know what you're thinking about.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Bonin. I'm a resident here at White Bear Lake. I live in Old Town, or I don't know what you people call it. I'm not from here originally, but it's the downtown area. And I am not really prepared to speak. I just came to observe. I'm a little confused about how all the city issues work, you know, the lake issues, and then Ramsey County controlling the lake, and then city council. And so I've just been trying to research and try to figure out what this is all about. So, but since you have the 15 minutes, I'm just going to take 2 because I'd like you to consider the dog beach in White Bear Lake and how it is affecting the water quality specifically. There's other issues, obviously, but it is an issue. And as I speak of water quality, there's also a contingency of boats that gather, collect outside of Chateauguay on the White Bear Lake side again. And I'm just concerned about water quality because I'm a resident and I use it too. And so those are the 2 things that I'd just like you to keep on your mind as we move forward. I'll be watching what you do and trying to learn so that I can better speak to these issues. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And just so you know, so Sherry is our administrator, and if you ever have any questions, you can get to her email on our website, and feel free to ask or raise any concerns that you have with Sherry, and she'll make sure that they get to us.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
And Rachel, can you spell your first and last name for me?
My first is Rachel.
Okay.
Last name is Bonin. It's Bonin.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, we'll move along to new business. And the first item is the Eurasian Water Milfoil Survey and Treatment Presentation. And Mike, do you want to set this up, or should we just get...
Every year we survey with Steve McComas of Blue Water Science for Eurasian Water Milfoil. Steve determines all the GPS coordinates and all the places that we check. And we treat, and Steve goes out and checks how the treatment went, and he knows everything about the lake and most other lakes. So if you have any questions, think about him while he's doing the presentation, because I'm sure he can answer them all. So Steve, if you want to come up and give a presentation for what we've been doing this summer.
Thank you very much, Mike, and good evening, members of the board. And again, it's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you all. And also, I really do appreciate the opportunity to work on the lake as well. What a joy that is to visit White Bear Lake on a number of occasions. It's a great lake. What we're doing earlier this year is, with the help of Mike Pronto on the boat, because he knows this lake better than I do and better than a lot of folks. He knew typically, and again, where a lot of this milfoil is. So it really helps target and focus our survey to get the milfoil. We do want to keep Eurasian water milfoil under control and keep it from becoming a recreational and a navigational hindrance. So that's the value of keeping on top of Eurasian water milfoil. And so I'll just go through some slides here. With the help of Mike Pronto, on June 27th, you can see our lines and our boat track basically around the entire lake. And we're looking for Eurasian water milfoil And where we found it, we had it marked as light, moderate, or heavy growth with a green, yellow, or red dot. And you can see that it was fairly widespread around the lake. And when we get that type of a result, then we go back to the office, and with GPS, we'll circle up areas that should be treated, knowing that by June 27th, that's the existing condition, that in another few weeks, it's going to be probably topping out at the lake surface and possibly spreading as well. So we like to treat it before it gets to a very advanced stage. So on June 27th, we did that, and then we go back and we circle up some areas to be treated. And here's what we found. We found a total of about 16 areas that could be treated. And this year, that density, that number of acres that came out to be about, it's too small, about 33 acres. So with that, you can see that the average areas to treat were usually less than 3 or 4 acres. Site number 1 was the biggest, and we want to hit that to make sure we can knock it down. That's kind of by the boat access as well, and keep it from fragmenting and spreading from boat traffic and things along those lines. So with that, you can see we went around the lake, and that's what was treated after our initial survey. So as we're going that, here's kind of what some of the next slide shows. That's just an underwater view of some Eurasian water milfoil. It starts out like this, and we have some milfoil that will branch. When that branches, that indicates that it's going to probably be at the surface forming a mat eventually. So at this early stage, we can see some of the branching occurring, and those are the areas that we did try to treat and to knock it down before it hit the surface and would mat and cause some ecological but more navigational and recreational concerns. So the next slide shows 2 maps. The first delineation, it's called, we go around and we had circle up areas to treat, and then we went back and checked in August, which was kind of at this time of the year, or for this summer, we still had pretty much peak growing conditions in August. So what did we find? Most of the milfoil that was treated was really knocked back. We have a lot of black dots, which indicate no milfoil. So of those 16 areas that were treated, we only had milfoil showing up at a few spots, and this is still in August. There's still some growing season left, but for the most part, very good control. Now, Mike Pronto mentioned earlier this evening that site number 9 seemed to have some rebound. Either it wasn't knocked down or it wasn't really impacted by herbicides in number 9 and possibly number 16. So sometimes that happens. We did use a couple of different types of herbicides. Mike has been very good about kind of experimenting as we go. For example, what we've been doing in some years is treating half the lake with one type of herbicide, then the other side of the lake with another herbicide, and then the following year switching. So you treat the other side with kind of the different herbicide. That way you reduce the potential resistance of milfoil to these herbicides. Farmers have been doing that for a long time in the agricultural area, and it seems to have a nice impact here on white bear. Sites number 9 and 16 we used a new herbicide this year, a pretty expensive herbicide, and we had some mixed results that it would appear in those 2 areas. So that's something that we can work on and know next year probably might change up our strategy a little bit. So overall, milfoil was fairly well controlled in the lake this year. Our growing season was a little bit extended. I mean, I was out today on a lake, and we still have green milfoil. It's actually resprouting in some areas. So that's a little bit beyond our control. Not real typical, but this has been kind of an atypical summer, too, for aquatic plant growth. When we look at the next slide, what we have here is a number of years ago, one of the board members said, you know, are there areas that are treated a lot? Is it kind of a stable kind of a community? And so she said, why don't you put those polygons on top of each other over the years? So here's what we have for the last 11 years. All the treatment areas are on this map. And you can see, yeah, there are some areas that seem to be persistent with persistent milfoil growth year after year, but at the same time, there's a lot of variability from year to year as well. And even the number of acres certainly changes from year to year too. So that gives us some kind of a background on to where milfoil probably will grow. You can see in some areas, milfoil just doesn't grow, and we haven't really found it in the last 20 years. So it's variable, and it's kind of dependent on sediment conditions and on climatic conditions from that standpoint, meaning when did the ice go on, when did it come off, how much sunlight are we getting, how cloudy are the days, and things like that. Those are all factors for milfoil growth from year to year. Well, I think the next slide shows, here's what we've kind of found going back to when we first found milfoil in, what was it, 1988?
Yep.
And one of the first lakes in the state. I mean, Minnetonka was first in 1987. Shortly after that, we found milfoil in White Bear. Initially, the thought was, well, let's really try to knock it back, keep it from spreading. So we did a very aggressive program in those first few years, but found that milfoil was still spreading no matter what we did, so we backed off. But then there was a period of 10 or 12 years in there where we had low levels of Eurasian milfoil and with low herbicide use. And then all of a sudden we had this spike coming up in the 2000s. And since then, there's been a gradual decrease again. That spike that we find there, with what I'm finding in other lakes, might have been when Eurasian water milfoil hybridized with the native plant, the native milfoil. And we get a big spike, and then after that, it kind of settles back down. I found this happening in a couple other lakes too. We do have a hybrid in here, which means northern milfoil, the native plant, can cross with the Eurasian milfoil and form this a hybrid, still considered to be an invasive species. But over the years then, especially in the last 10, 15 years, you can see there's been some fluctuations. This year actually was down a little bit compared to last year. You see some increases and decreases, but overall, the trend has been a decreasing trend. Hopefully, maybe someday we'll get back to where it was in the early 2000s, and we might be heading that way again. So that's Eurasian water milfoil. We also look at other types of invasive species. In this case, zebra mussels. And last year, 2023, the Rice Creek Watershed District sponsored a point intercept survey. We're looking at all the plants in the lake in a systematic way. But what we did too is we, at each of those sample points, those little black dots were all potential sample points. Wherever we sampled plants, we were looking for zebra mussels as well. And you can see that zebra mussels are pretty well distributed in 2023. Maybe in Commercial Bay, not as abundant in terms of distribution, but otherwise for the rest of the lake, yeah, mostly spread around. And I think what will happen is that as time goes on, we're going to see some decrease in zebra mussels. The next PI, or point intercept survey, is going to be scheduled for about 5 years from now. We'll see if there's been a decrease. That has been the trend as well. Zebra mussels typically will decline or decrease over time, but not disappear. They'll kind of get at some lower levels. And we're seeing that in lakes up in the Brainerd area where they've had zebra mussels for 15, 20 years. Well, another invasive species that we've been looking for is SSW, starry stonewort. We did a search at the three main public accesses, or two accesses and the marina area. We did not find any starry stonewort in White Bear. Probably the biggest concentration right now in the state is up in Lake Coronis, which is in Stearns and Wright County. So it's about 2 hours from here. And that map on the left there, Coronis, shows the distribution of starry stonewort. It's fairly abundant. And unchecked, it right now is covering about 900 acres in Lake Coronis. And that picture on the right is the mat that will form in unchecked or untreated areas. It can be 1 to 2 to 5 feet thick, this mat of starry stonewort. It's a macroalgae, not a rooted aquatic plant, but it can really have some disruption, especially in the shallow water. So we are tracking, or we're certainly searching for starry stonewort. The good news is that, good news, bad news, if you do find it in the lake, you want to find it early. And so then you can hopefully, we have a better chance at containing starry stonewort in these, usually in the public access area, and before it spreads around the lake. And Lake Coronis, by the time they found starry stonewort, it was the first lake in the state in 2015. It was already covering 150 acres. So it had been in that lake for a number of years and was not going to be contained. So and since then it has really spread throughout much of the growing area, plant area in Coronis. So we don't have that in White Bear at this point. So that's good news. So we'll keep on tracking the milfoil and looking for other invasive species as well. And it's been a good partnership. Again, Mike Pronto, can't thank him enough for all the help and work he's put in helping us track the Eurasian water milfoil. So with that, we'll wait and see what happens next year. Next year, it's hard to predict because this plant is a little bit unpredictable. But we do expect it'll be around. The question is, where will it be? So we'll track that again, get on it next year. Any questions? Yeah.
Can you explain what's happening in the milfoil this time of year? You look at it and it looks like it's got a big furry overcoat.
Yeah.
If you want to go out and find milfoil, it's easy to find because it just stands out from everything else because it's like twice the thickness. What happens?
That's a good point. Milfoil is starting to die back a little bit, or it's not growing actively. So what's happening is the filamentous algae is now taking advantage of that and is using that surface to grow. And so what we're seeing is a coating of filamentous algae around Eurasian water milfoil. Not so much around other plants. Some of our native plants are either already too far gone or they're still actively growing. And so we don't see quite that same pattern for our native plants. But Eurasian milfoil does have that tendency to kind of attract filamentous algae. And also what happens in lakes with zebra mussels, zebra mussel impact is one of their impacts is that their fecal material goes down to the bottom sediments, kind of concentrates the phosphorus in the algae that they have filtered. It's converted to the fecal pellets. It's down the bottom. Some of that phosphorus will come up and go into filamentous algae growth. This time of the year, it's still growing, and part of that is it's growing on the milfoil because milfoil is starting to die back a little bit, not actively growing, and so filamentous algae is glomming onto that.
We also had an algae bloom this summer, late summer.
Oh yeah.
More than we've had in a number of years, although it's not unusual. But can you kind of explain how that happens? And does zebra mussels have anything to do with that?
That probably is a zebra mussel effect, from the standpoint that in the water, we know how widespread the zebra mussels are with that map. Well, they're filters, and they're filtering out the edible algae. The water is clear during the middle of the summer, and it's clear because there's not much algae in there, because a lot of our algae in White Bear has been unicellular. It's green algae. It's a good, healthy species, and that is also very edible by zebra mussels. So as they filter out that algae, they are the fecal pellets that are developed fall to the bottom, and then what happens is the phosphorus in that algae is down now in the bottom sediments, and that it will eventually be decomposed by the microbes down there, releasing some phosphorus, and that phosphorus later in the summer can go into other algae growth, and specifically blue-green algae, especially when the water gets warmer. Blue-greens, or the cyanobacteria, are more competitive at these warmer temperatures for growth than the native algae are. The native algae are kind of running their course. I mean, diatoms and the greens and these other species.
Is that all something that's natural and we shouldn't worry about it?
It is natural for lakes with zebra mussels. And as the zebra mussel population decreases, that incidence of blue-green algae blooms will also decrease. We also had warmer temperatures this summer, warmer water temperatures, and that also was a factor for cyanobacteria growth. So different weather conditions and different zebra mussel conditions will also dictate a little bit different cyanobacteria conditions.
And so there's nothing to do with it, it just evolves.
That is the way, that's the pattern right now that we're in when we have this combination of warm temperatures and combined with some zebra mussels and the zebra mussel population. And that's going to change next. It's not this is probably a blip and not necessarily a trend. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Meredith?
Yeah.
When you were on White Bear this summer, did you see species that look like blue-green algae?
No, I didn't. Not
Okay.
earlier this summer.
Okay.
No. Blue-greens are probably going to be present in the water column, but in the middle of the summer at very low concentrations. So the typical pattern is you start with diatoms in the spring at cold temperatures. They don't last very long. They die back. The next population comes in, phytoplankton or algae are the greens, and they're dominant for June and maybe into July, and as they die back or outcompeted, blue-greens will start outcompeting them in the warmer temperatures. Now, when we have low nutrients in the lake, the blue-greens just don't have much to grow on. So they're going to be present, but at low concentrations. And even though some of those blue-green species or members within the community could be toxic, there's such low concentrations, they're not going to be toxic to animals, pets, or us. So that is also a kind of a pattern. And with warm temperatures, they're a little bit more abundant. Yeah.
Another question. I had heard that there were some weeds that you found on the survey that were perhaps more difficult to identify. Have we identified all the weeds we've found?
Well, we put a name on them.
Okay.
But well, here's what happens. Some of these stringy pond weeds are very similar. And so so what we'll do for some of these species, we call it a Potamogeton, that's the genus name, but without being very specific, without knowing exactly what the species is, we'll go SP, meaning a Potamogeton, a pondweed species. And I was concerned about that because 20, 30 years ago, I was running in the same situation. I took some of these stringy pondweeds to the Wisconsin State botanist, aquatic botanist, and said, Sandy, what is this, what are these species here? And he looked at me and goes, I don't know. He goes, they all look alike. So some of this is we could take them back to the office, and under the microscope, you can look at very, very delicate and minute details, but basically it's a pondweed, Potamogeton species, but we're not quite sure what the species is, so we're at that level. But they're good, healthy native plants. So we're not having any problem with 19 out of the 20 species.
One more question.
Sure.
So late summer, I noticed almost what looked like balls of algae in the lake. What is that?
That is more likely colonial algae, colonial blue-green algae, unfortunately. But later in the summer, what they'll do is, and a lot of times there's several species that will do this, and one of those is a species called Microcystis. So what that is it's a glob of cells held together with polysaccharide material, and it's colonial, meaning that there are thousands and thousands of these cyanobacteria in this little glob, and they form these little balls, and they're in the water column. They go up and down the water column, act almost independently of each other, even though each one of those little balls has thousands of individual cells. And that's also fairly common, and will run its course as temperatures change.
Mark?
If lake users were to, say, want even less milfoil, what would you recommend, and what could you do if?
Well, I think the thing to do or to consider is put Eurasian milfoil in with the same boat, so to speak, as the native plants. So we have a lot of, this year especially, was a real weedy year. And a lot of the native plants were also very abundant. So even if we were to go in and knock out the milfoil with a specific herbicide and knock that down, we still have the native plants that are present and can cause or can represent almost as much of a problem as the milfoil. So we're knocking down the milfoil that is going to be at the surface and matting at the surface. Some of our native plants do that too. So I think the thing to do is to knock down the heaviest growth of milfoil, knowing that there are going to be some areas of milfoil as well as the native plants also. There's been some lakes have asked that question too, and a lot of our pondweeds, a lot of our broadleaf pondweeds will put up seed stalks and look like it's a real problem, but their stem densities are not a recreational or a ecological problem. And milfoil is kind of the same way. Might put up a seed stalk here and there. A lot of our milfoil that is not treated is light growth, so to speak, in terms of stem densities, meaning that it's not real thick and not apt to mat. So I would think we want to be careful about what do we treat, and no need to treat something that was not going to have a significant recreational or ecological, benefit.
Meredith?
One more question. As you travel around the lake or around the state to all these lakes, are you seeing any lake that's doing anything great to try to prevent starry stonewort?
Yeah, I am seeing some things.
What are you seeing?
Well, we're searching the public access. Out of the 31 lakes in Minnesota with starry stonewort, 29 of those lakes starry has been found right at the public access initially. So that's the place to search. And so some lakes are searching 2 or 3 times a year at the public access to look for starry stonewort. And if it's found on a half dozen lakes that I'm familiar with, they've been treating it as soon as they find it, and it's only like sometimes a half acre, maybe an acre around that public access. And they'll have to treat it, though, 2 or 3 times a year. But there's some lakes now going on 6, 7 years where they've been able to contain starry right at that half to 1 acre area at the public access, and it's not spreading throughout the lake. So that's good news. However, we haven't eliminated starry from a lake yet. Now, there was a famous professor from Clemson who was brought in for Lake Coronis and also down in Lake Sylvia, and I was out there with him looking at starry stonewort, and I said, Dr. Rogers, anything we can do with this? And he looked at me and he just said, starry stonewort is tenacious. You have to be more tenacious. So basically that's kind of what we've been doing, is treating some of these public access areas, small areas, 2 or 3 times a year to contain it. And for right now, that's been a success compared to a situation like Coronis, where it's up to 900 acres when it's been unchecked and gotten past the point of containment. Starry stonewort's a little bit different than milfoil. Milfoil is hard to contain and will spread by fragments and everything else. Starry doesn't seem to have that ability at this point. So we do want to check it, and that has been probably I guess you could say, a success story.
Other questions? Okay, I have just a couple. I'll just build on that. So should we be searching for starry stonewort more times per year? Like, should we make that our general practice, or?
Well, if there's, it can be done a couple ways. Even volunteers can look at it, throwing rakes off the end of the dock to find starry. The DNR sometimes will search for starry too, and in some cases you can get contractors to do a little bit more in-depth search for starry, and probably could be done maybe twice a year. For example, maybe in June or July, where it'd just be starting to grow, and then maybe at the end of the growing season in September, even into October. So then if it is present, you could still treat it that year and keep it from maybe getting and expanding. So it's not uncommon to search at least once, and that's kind of what we're doing now, and in some cases twice. Medicine Lake right now is probably the potential spreader for the metro area. It's about 20 acres of starry and Medicine, and people I've talked to said they're having trouble containing it. So it seems to be spreading around the lake. That could be a potential spreader. If it gets on a boat or a trailer, and then that boat goes right to a White Bear, that could be bringing something in. So.
And we'd probably want to look at the boat launch areas.
The boat launch, yeah. The public access for example, in White Bear, the most likely case would be, Mataska or Ramsey County. And Commercial Bay, what happens there is that once those boats are in, they're pretty much in for the year. Mm-hmm. So not as much of a high priority, but those active accesses, probably.
Okay. And then, so as the weather, as our climate starts getting warmer, it seems like it's trending that way. Should we, and I know we did this one year, we treated the milfoil twice. I think we did that one year. And two different times. And should we be considering that? Like, we treated in June or early July, and should we be thinking about treating it again in August, or what do you think?
It's a good question. I would think generally we don't have to do that. If we treat it, the timing has been pretty good. The way Mike has it set up, and I agree with it too, we're surveying in mid to late June. And by that time, it's not hit the surface yet. So for the 4th of July, it's still probably not much of a problem. We're treating it in early July and knock it down through July, and that takes us into August. So we get good control for at least 5-6 weeks. There is some regrowth, but not every year. And even if there is some regrowth coming in September and October, the boating season is pretty much done. So recreationally, it's not much of a problem. And even if we were to treat it in September, even into October, we wouldn't get much benefit for that year, and not necessarily benefit into the next year anyway, because this stuff, it'll grow if the conditions are right. So I think one time a year, if it's timed correctly, is probably adequate.
Okay. And on the blue-green algae, when does it reach a point where we or somebody ought to be notifying people that, hey, this is in this area, keep your dogs away, or whatever?
A good rule of thumb with that is if you have transparency that's less than 3 feet, that typically, that transparency in our Minnesota lakes is due almost entirely to algae concentrations. Not turbidity, not sediments or resuspended sand, silt, and clay, but algae. So if we have a transparency of 3 feet or less, that's probably an algae bloom. And typically that algae bloom is probably going to be cyanobacteria or blue-greens, especially if it's in July and August. So you get to that point, the MPCA would recommend that you try to avoid those areas. And by that they mean a lot of times it is in the nearshore area. You probably don't want to run your dog and in that water. But we haven't had a 3-foot transparency in White Bear in a long, long time. We're in pretty good shape in White Bear. But as a general rule of thumb, the 3-foot transparency is probably pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mike?
The transparency this year, beginning of the year, was 17.5 feet, and it stayed that way until we had the algae bloom. At the height of the algae bloom, it was 6.5 feet.
Oh, no kidding.
And then like 2 weeks later, it was 11 feet, and now it's back to almost 18 feet.
That's cyanobacteria. It's 2 billion years old. It's the oldest plant on Earth. And it just has, you just can't, it's hard to predict, it's hard to beat. We're still working on it. If we can figure out how to control blue-greens, that'd be something. But this year was probably a little bit of an anomaly from the standpoint of the combination of zebra mussels and warm water and probably sunlight, all those factors. But 6 feet, although that's not good for White Bear, still, for the most part, safe.
It was for like a week, maybe a week, 2 weeks.
Isn't that something? That blue-green, it has these gas vacuoles. They can go up and down in the water column. It can start growing about a foot off the bottom, and we never see it. And then all of a sudden, he picks up all those nutrients and then gets some gas vacuoles and floats up to the surface, and then is up there in the upper water column, and then it runs out of nutrients, and then it sinks again. So it's good news is that White Bear does not have very much phosphorus. So the blue-green's probably not going to be sustained. That's probably what happened. They probably picked up some excess phosphorus, got a couple replications, and got up to the surface to get sun, then ran out of nutrients, and they crashed. So.
Okay. Any other questions on the weed treatment this year? Okay. And Steve, so what I'd like to do is we'll jump to the Lakeview study item, which also involves Steve. But before we do that, Sherry, will we put this presentation on our website? Is that?
If you want me to, sure.
Sure.
Yeah. Anybody opposed to that?
No.
All right. Okay. So Meredith, can I turn it over to you?
Sure. So Steve is going to give us a preview of some of the results that have come in so far in our 2024 Lakeview study.
Well, thanks. This has been so interesting because we did this back in 2005, a lake use study. And the board said, what's going on in the lake? Is it crowded? Are there too many boats? What kind of boats are out there? When are they coming? who's coming from where, what are they doing, what's the dominant boating? Is it safe? Is it too crowded? All those things. So that's what we tried to do with this lake use study, really replicating what was done in 2005, and there was an earlier one done in 1999. So when we complete this, all the data, we'll be able to make comparisons going back 25 years. So we'll see what the trends might be. So the lake use study involved a boat inventory. We went around the whole shoreline of the lake, counted every single boat on shore and at a dock. In fact, counted docks and counted lifts and everything else. And that was the boat inventory. We can compare that to previous surveys. Lake boating density. We were also out 6 days this week, or 6 days this year, and counted all the boats on the lake every hour and a half to look at what is the boating, how many boats are there, and we divided the lake up into 3 lobes, kind of a north, west, and then south. And how many boats are out there, and is one part of the lake more crowded than another part of the lake, and things like that. And how many acres per boat was there? So that boating density is done. Boater exit surveys. So on a number of days, we were at the access, and we were asking questions that the DNR doesn't ask. And we were able to get about 40, 50 of those surveys, and those are completed. Lake user surveys, by that I mean, that's kind of the lake user, lake resident, probably a better name would have been lake resident surveys. We mailed out 100 questionnaires to lake residents. We got the address from staff, from Sherry. Meredith was also able to put up online a link to our questionnaire. So far we have about 100 returns. That's an excellent return. And we're going through those lake resident surveys. We'll be doing that shortly. And so that's in process. And then Minnesota DNR. What we did back in 2005 is we had 4 or 5 people stationed around the lake, at Mataska Marsh and Ramsey County and Commercial Bay for 15 hours from 6 in the morning till 9 at night. And we're looking and counting all boats coming in and asking a couple questions. Well, it turns out the DNR started doing that about 2010, 12. So we didn't have to staff that, but the DNR has that type of data. In fact, they have more than 6 days. They have 60 days. So we're probably not going to look at all 60 days, but we're going to use the Minnesota DNR boat data to talk about how many boats are coming in over a day, what time periods they're coming in, where they're coming from, and we'll get a lot of that information to compare to what we did in 2005 and 1999. So that's pending. That we don't have the link yet. The DNR data are available, or they will be available, and we're talking to Tina to get all that information. So that is kind of the overview of what we did. I do have some results, and so for example, the boat inventory is shown here. We did that in 99, 2002, 4, 5, and 2024. Some trends that are kind of jump out. One is look at the decrease in number of fishing boats. And fishing boats are characterized as a rear tiller. Anything with a rear tiller was a fishing boat. Anything with a console was a runabout. Well, the rear tillers have decreased in number from 2005 to 2024. So have canoes. The conventional canoe, that number is down. But look at the kayaks. They were present in 2005. We lumped them in the canoes, but there weren't very many kayaks back in 2005. But by far, that is probably one of the most dominant boats in the whole lake. Also an increase in personal watercraft, that's PWC. The runabouts, that is anything with a console, inboard, outboard, or even a big outboard, but with a console. Those numbers have stayed relatively consistent. Sailboat numbers have gone down, but there's been a significant increase in pontoons. The paddle boat, where you sit in, you paddle, that number has gone down a little bit. But paddle boards have gone way up. They weren't even around back in 2005, so that's a relatively new thing. And so we have also numbers, I didn't show them here, but on boat lifts and docks and everything else that we will also have, we'll be listing as well. So the other thing we looked at was boating density. So 4 peak days, those are weekends or holidays. We had 4 days of that, and then we had 2 days we called off-peak in the middle of the week. So we looked at the maximum number of boats on the lake. And we do have this broken down too by north, west, and south lobes of the lake, so to speak. The maximum number of boats we found was July 7th, and that was 160 boats on the lake on that. And that was a time period. We did this in 1.5 hour time periods as well. The peak number of boats on an off-peak day, or maximum number of boats, was 71. So probably not too unusual. I did not set up our charts to compare. We have numbers going, peak numbers going back through 2005 and 1999 as well. So that'll be interesting to see. We then took the number of boats on the lake, divided it by the lake size to get acres per boat. You know, how many acres per boat was there? To feel safe, we're going to be able to correlate that to what the questionnaires are in terms of, do you feel safe on the lake or not? The highest density of boats on July 7th was about 15 acres per boat. So is that a high density or low density? That's something that we will be working with, comparing it to other lakes. Lake Minnetonka does something like this, and we can compare it to other lakes as well as comparing it back to 2005 and earlier. So that was that number of acres per boat. You know, if you're a fishing boat, 1 acre is about the size of a football field. So you got 15 football fields per boat. Now, that's on average. Some are a little bit closer together, but you probably can still ski in there. Number of ski boats, we'll get that number too. That's down compared to 2005. Actual ski boats, a little bit more tubing, and still, you probably want a few more acres than 15 per ski boat. But there aren't that many ski boats. The peak time on peak days was 1:30 to 4:30, whereas the peak time for boats on White Bear Lake was 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And both off-peak and peak days, the side of the lake with the most boats was the north end versus Commercial Bay versus the south end. So the north end is probably the most popular. We also did some boater exit surveys, and I probably don't have to go, that's going to be, hopefully that could be after Meredith and Mark review that, if it's okay, probably can then put it on the website. But here's what we found.
Hey, Steve, would you mind using the mic? Sorry about that. Sorry.
How many hours were you on the lake? How frequently did you visit the lake? What was the approximate distance between your residence and White Bear? That's kind of interesting. The average was 15 miles, and the range was 0 to, somebody lives right in town, to 35 miles, meaning that that's helpful because most of our Starry Stonewort lakes, for example, are 80 to 90 to 100 miles away, except for Medicine Lake. Where did you park? And then we have some other questions too. Now, in this survey, it didn't, we go back one. Where did you park? Everybody in our peak days and off-peak days were saying they were able to park at the access. Although driving around, there's always a few boats that are parked on city streets as well. I do think once we get all the numbers in that, we'll see how that compares to 2005. Now, questions number 5 and 6 and 7. Fishing was pretty popular. Some of that might be a little bit biased because our surveys went from about 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And so there's a little bit more fishing earlier in the day than the boaters are coming in at 1:30 to 4. The tubers, recreational fishing. And some factors that, why did you choose White Bear? Experience today, for the most part, good. Enforcement, did you see any water patrol today? For the most part, no. But we'll get some additional information from the DNR as well, and on our lake resident questions as also. Speaking of that, the homeowner survey, we've had some very good responses. The questions are shown there. That we'll be compiling those, also be able to compare that to we had some of the same questions that we had back in 2005. It'll be interesting to see how the perceptions or what has changed maybe out there. And then lastly, our DNR boat inspection data is coming. That'll allow us to get the number of boats coming to White Bear Lake, what lake were they at previously, and also the type of boat coming into White Bear. And we'll be able to make those comparisons to previous years as well. That's a very unique study, and I think a very important study. And then from that, we'll be able to make recommendations on should anything be changed or what should be changed to enhance the experience or make some improvements. So,
Okay, and just for the board's information, so once this study is all completed, then Steve will come back and present the final findings for us.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Quick one. That boat inventory, did that include Commercial Bay?
Yes. Wait, it did include Commercial Bay, and those numbers
did?
for Commercial Bay are not in there.
They're not in that.
I did not combine Commercial Bay with the residential.
Got it.
boat, But we do have the Commercial Bay
Counts.
Yes.
The interesting thing, if you look at those numbers, if you take kayaks and paddle boards out, it looks like we have the lowest number of boats we've had since 2005.
Yeah. And
There's like
look at
935 boats. That's
pontoons.
interesting.
That's, that's.
And I have a tiller, so I'm
possibly
part
a
of the
trend.
40.
It's possibly a trend. Some of our recreational activities on a lake are going from active to more passive.
Yeah.
Meaning viewing is very important, as well as, skiing and fishing.
Interesting,
and
yeah.
cruising. So we'll see how that works out. But
Okay.
good observation, good points. Well, we'll look at but at the same time, kayaks are still a boat,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
and maybe we're more exercise oriented these
Yeah.
days. But there's a lot of kayaks. And now wherever I go to the lake, I'm always counting boats. I'm counting kayaks. I'm going, look at all those kayaks. So it is certainly a trend.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
For coming out. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on. Under new business, the Conservation District website update. Sherry?
Last year, as you remember, I came to the board to ask for some funds to refresh our website, the White Bear Lake Conservation District website. It is a good website, but I don't really know when it was designed, but we've added quite a few things to it, and we use it more robustly. And so I wanted to go ahead and kind of organize things, organize topics, et cetera. We put $1,680 into the budget for that. So I just wanted to let you know that I am going to start working on that. I am going to ask for your informal assistance. If you look at the document that I have showing the tabs on our website, it just shows all the variety of things that we have. So just some general things about organizing things, cleaning up tabs, deleting some tabs, those kind of things. There are a couple of new things, though, that I would like to add. We do seem to use our scroll quite a bit on our website. And if you've seen other websites, they do have a box where you have scrolling updated news on the side, and so you don't have to take off one thing and put another. This you'll be able to scroll through topics that have been up for a while, and they can scroll through up and down to give people better access to some of the things that we have on our website that we want to direct people to. Another thing that would be really nice to do, and I think we've talked about this before, Lake Minnetonka, a lot of other websites also have this as well, is like a weather cam. I know that the VFW has a weather cam on top of their building, and so I would just like to investigate how maybe we might be able to put that on our webpage as well, seeing that people go to our website, and look at the conditions of the lake. So What's going to happen is November, December, and January are the times that I'm really going to look through this, kind of conduct some research on websites, look to see how we can clean things up. I would also, I will formally ask you maybe to look at our website. Maybe you have some ideas. Maybe you, if you want to help me, you're certainly welcome to do that too. This is not an extensive thing. I just want to kind of clean it up and just make it an easier, more clean website to look at. By February, hopefully, we will have gone through some things. I will have gone through some things, put together what we might need to do, give it to WireBuilt, who is our webmaster. They're the ones that said that they can put this together. Of course, if there's something that we want and it might be more complex, it might add to the cost of that. We don't know. But anyways, I'm hoping by at least February, we'll get a draft of the website. We'll get an idea of what the cost might be, and then hopefully March or somewhere around that time that WireBuilt can build our website. What they would do is build the website off-grid, whatever, then they would load it back up when it was ready to go. So I just wanted to make you aware of it. I don't know if you have any questions. Let me know.
I have one.
Yeah,
So the money we've allocated, is that for 2025?
correct.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions for Sherry on that? Okay, thank you, Sherry. Okay, moving on. Next item, under unfinished business, the VFW's EAW, the draft findings of fact and record of decision and resolution. So I'll just kind of set it up. The VFW has an interest in expanding their dock. That resulted in a mandatory EAW, and we've been working through that process now. We got to a point about a month or so ago where it looked complete to us, and so at that point it went out on public notice. That public notice period ended October 10th. We received 5 comments back on the through the public comment period, and now we're at a point where the board needs to decide whether the environmental review work that was completed through the EAW, if that's adequate, or if the board would like to I guess, move forward with the preparation of an environmental impact statement. And did I miss anything there, Alan?
I don't think so, Chair. It is published out there in the Environmental Quality Bulletin, and that period of time you're talking about is both a question and a comment period. And so it's a chance for someone who's really curious about the project or thinks we've missed something to ask a question. And then obviously it culminates in this, which includes findings and answers and any comments.
Okay. And so we have in front of us all of that. And in addition, we have a resolution in front of us. This is resolution, single page, and this was in, this was at your spot tonight, the updated. And Alan, any suggestions here, or do we have to read through the whole thing, or can we summarize, or how would you suggest we go about this?
Yeah, the resolution lays out, and it's on page, 29, 23 of the packet, or at least in my PDF, and the previous, 20 or so pages before that were the actual findings. And so the resolution is accepting the findings and moving forward and making what's called a negative declaration, which is essentially it's pre-programmed because that's just what we found. So that's why it's set up this way, to basically say by resolution that environmental review process does not have to go any further. So it's completed with this environmental assessment worksheet, basically. And so you can certainly go through and highlight some of the features of it, talk to the public about what the project actually is. It would probably be illustrative to tell what the DNR said relative to the project. That was probably the most meaningful comment that we got, which is probably pretty typical of these projects for the DNR to say that anyway. And again, this is all driven by Minnesota rules and basically a companionship with them and with you guys as the local governmental, responsible governmental unit, basically.
Okay, so I think you've all had an opportunity to see it. Basically, the DNR on October 10th, sent some comments. The first one is that even though the EAW may be coming to a finish line, there's still, the DNR permit still needs to be updated. And then they also noted some rare features in this area, and the rare features, the items that fall under that are the Blandings turtle, the least darter, the lake sturgeon, few flowered spike rush, and narrow-leaved water plantain. These are all species of special concern. The guidance, I guess, that the DNR provided is that, you know, this Blandings turtle, that's basically September to April, and where the Blanding turtle could be impacted if it's in the area is through the installation or taking out of the docks, where you might stir up sediment on the bottom that could potentially impact the Blanding turtle. The people doing the work with the docks are advised that if they see a Blanding turtle, they should pick it up and move it out of the project area. And this is something I'll just say, at least from my perspective, this isn't unique to the VFW. This is, I'm sure this impacts all of Commercial Bay. And so one thing, and just a side note that we'll talk about at a future meeting, is whether we should be advising the Commercial Bay docks to pay attention when they're putting in their docks or taking them out. But that's a future discussion. And, you know, I think that pretty much summarizes what the DNR said, other than there's a Blandings turtle flyer. I know Luke has shared that with the board at a previous meeting, or handed it out after the meeting, and that should be given to the contractors working in the area, so whoever is installing the dock, so that they're aware that the Blanding turtle, they should pay attention to whether the Blanding turtle is present or not. Good?
Yeah, if
Okay.
you wanted to hit the highlights just from the findings, you can go down to what's page 5 of our findings, page 11 in the packet, and just go through the 4 points, basically our findings, conclusions in that document. They're all essentially reiterated in the resolution that you'll be passing, so either one is fine.
And is that, are you talking about section 6 there, comparison of potential impacts?
Yep.
That's on my page 5.
Decision on the need for the environmental impact statement is what the caption is on mine.
Okay, got it, thank you.
4 fading into page 5 of the actual findings.
Yep. Okay, so under, what's that? I guess it would be 7, with the heading Decision on the Need for an Environmental Impact Statement. You can read it there, but the synopsis is that, you know, based on the EAW work that was done and the findings of fact and record of decision document, which you have in front of you, the item 1, these documents were completed in compliance with the procedures that they were supposed to be completed under. The EAW and related documentation have satisfactorily addressed all of the issues for which the existing information could have been reasonably obtained. The project does not have the potential for significant environmental effects based upon the above findings and the evaluation of the following 4 criteria, which are part of Minnesota rules, Part 4410, 1700, Subpart 7, type, extent, reversibility of environmental effects, cumulative potential effects, extent to which the environmental effects are subject to mitigation by ongoing public regulatory authority, and the extent to which environmental effects can be anticipated and controlled as a result of other environmental studies undertaken by public agencies or the project proposer, including other EISs. The findings of the White Bear Lake Conservation District that the EAW is adequate and no EIS is required, provides no endorsement or approval or right to develop the proposal, and cannot be relied upon as an indication of such approval. The findings allow the proposer to formally initiate the district's process for considering the specific discretionary permissions necessary for the expansion proposed, which all that means, in my opinion, is that the proposer, the VFW in this case, still needs to go through our permitting process if they want to pursue the additional slips. Informed by the record to identify and encourage elements for the orderly expansion proposed and assure their implementation at this site.
Yeah, and essentially this completes the pre-work before the two-step process that is the next DNR application, right, for the expansion. And then once they're done there, it'd be just a permit with that expanded number to you guys,
Yeah,
to
and
the
that,
board.
yeah, thanks for raising that point. So they still do need the DNR permit.
Yep, the MinPARS hasn't been updated yet because this is sort of the gateway or the bottleneck to get into that. So with this done, it shouldn't take long, I wouldn't think.
Good, thank you for that.
And I couldn't remember, and I asked Luke whether or not, and maybe the representatives know, I can't remember because it's been so long, if we've actually seen a permit that's been turned into the DNR yet. So I don't know if there is one or not.
You know, I think that the VFW made the application to the DNR for an updated permit. It seems like it might just be sitting at the DNR.
I couldn't remember, and Luke couldn't either.
I don't think we've seen an updated DNR permit.
We're waiting at this point for the conservation, it's the cart growers, whoever.
Yep.
Chicken egg.
Yep.
They're going to be deference to you guys.
Sure, so once we get through the EAW process, that should turn the DNR loose to finalize their
Should
permitting
be
process.
in their hands, basically. So.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, and then what happens next, of course, is this will get published as our official record or of your official record, right? And then at that point, it becomes sort of history. So the last time we went through that, I think, was with maybe Docks of White Bear Lake, I think, when they had their official expansion. So it's been a while. This doesn't happen that often in Commercial Bay.
Right. So we have the resolution in front of us. And again, the resolution is that the district adopts the findings and conclusions, including the comments as well as the responses to questions presented contained therein. The district makes a negative declaration on the need for an EIS for the project and deems the EAW process sufficient review of environmental impacts for the project. The district authorizes the distribution of this resolution and the findings and conclusions as required by Minnesota Rule 4410.1700 subpart 5. This resolution is hereby adopted and is effective immediately. So I'll make a motion to adopt this resolution 2024-02.
Second.
Second, thank you. So we have a motion and a second to adopt. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay. And we're on to reports and action items, executive committee. The executive committee didn't meet this month, so no report. Lake Quality Committee, Mike?
The lake level today is 922.56. 922.56. Last year at this time, it was 922.24, so we have a gain for the year. Of course, it goes up and down all year long anyhow. Lake temperature today is 55 degrees. Last year it was 54 degrees, so it's consistent. Be interesting to see what kind of a winter we have after last winter.
We need snow.
So I've been kind of looking at the numbers, and so far we're in the same range as past years, so there's nothing out of whack. It's just, I don't know. We'll see. We'll be here to find out.
Yeah.
That's it.
Any questions for Mike?
Phragmites was treated October 7th.
Okay. Diane? Yeah, just grab that guy. Thank you.
How many acres of Phragmites was treated this year, do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's similar to last year, but it's, I won't know till the applicator comes back
We'll see when we get
and
the
tells me exactly how many he treated, because it goes into a shape file, which is all GPS points and numbers in a spreadsheet that only the computer can read. And I asked, because we do this with the University of Minnesota, I asked if they could produce a map. And they said, well, we've had a lot of lakes ask for that. To them, it all makes sense, but it doesn't to us. So next year, Julia Bowen has promised a map with the areas. But they have to change some of their computer work, but they've had requests, so they're going to, hopefully we'll have a map to show you next year, because it sure would be nice. But it's not a big area, under 2 acres.
Okay, any questions for Mike? Okay, we'll move on. Lake Utilization Committee, Chris?
First thing on there, Docks of White Bear Lake, they're renewing their DNR permit because it's expired, and then they're trying to get that for their permit for this year. The highlights of it is, from previous permit to now, is we've obviously going from 260 slips to 250, which we've voted on in the past. So we'll get that synced up. DNR called out some stuff on allowing that boathouse. That's a structure in the marina there that they use for the boat club. So they called out some verbiage there. And then the ADUA line over in Lions Park, just getting that memorialized and documented a little better to make sure that what the city has said in the survey is documented there for that. So the 18.5 degrees from center to the lake, they'll have that in there, so we know exactly how that line is there. But those are the kind of the 3 highlights there on that.
Okay, and the stage that we're at with this particular item is that Docks White Bear made application to the DNR for a revised permit. The DNR sent that out for public comment. Public comment ends October 25th. And so the question before the board is whether we want to make any comments. And but just for discussion purposes, I'll propose that the one comment we make is to make sure that that ADUA line is properly memorialized in the DNR permit. And the city has provided a definition of that line, which is 18 degrees, 33 minutes, 14 seconds from the ADUA line to center of lake line. And so that, I think, would be our comment, that the DNR consider inserting that text into the permit so that it gets memorialized that way. So here's what I'll do, is I'll make a motion to that effect. If we get a second, then we can have some discussion.
Say the motion again, just to memorialize it.
The comment that from the board is that that ADUA line between Docks White Bear and Lions Park be defined as 18 degrees, 33 minutes, 14 seconds from the ADUA line to the theoretical center of the lake.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mike?
How about I read about that in the information put out before this. The Conservation District deciding on the length of the docks, depending on the water depth, and that the DNR would not be doing that. They would allow us to be the person that decides all of that. Telling them what we think and how we should be managing it, and they should, defer to us rather than go off and write their own numbers.
Okay, so, yeah, good question. So my understanding is that it's really that this permit modification request is for the 250, to go from 260 to 250 slips, to reconfigure the layout to comply with the WBLCD ADUA restrictions, and then to add the boathouse for public service structure, and then also to defer to the Conservation District for approval of dock configuration during low water conditions. So would we want to expand our comment to say defer to the White Bear Lake Conservation District for all dock configuration?
Yes, I think that's the best where, if we can get this one as the template and then we're accountable for it, then I think that's best for sure.
So I'll amend my motion to include that, and is that okay with the second?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion on this item? Any concerns from council?
Concern, I would offer, I guess, for the good of the order, that might be a different discussion with the DNR, because it's really an assignment of that authority, and so I don't know as they'd really want to do it, sort of permit by permit. This particular permit, I believe, is up just as a function of time, at whatever it is, 5 years or something like that. So these modifications get made whenever they're appropriate. But I mean, that would be one of those things that it'd be nice to get something really as an agreement and I say essentially an assignment, because it's what Minnetonka has. And I think we started that conversation this summer through exec when we did have Mr. Scollin here. And I'd say it's fair to say that he was not resistant to that. And so it does make more sense. And so I think it's something we can work on. But it'll probably come to the board as more of an official, scepter on the shoulder, sort of it's yours now, as opposed to doing it one at a time through these different marina permits.
Yeah, the reason I like the idea of including it in our comments is because it raises that item with the DNR again.
Not complaining at all. I mean, it makes a good place to do it. It is a public comment, and it's appropriate. I'm just saying it might not make it into the final permit.
Sure.
But, it'll come back to us, because I know it's something that we've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah, and just to build on that, that is something that the board, I think the board, at least the executive committee would like, is for the dock configurations to be removed from the DNR permits and bring that to the local level, the board, so that we have more flexibility for working with the commercial bay marina owners on, minor modifications to their dock layout, where historically we've been a little bit handcuffed because of the configuration that was shown in the DNR permit. And as Alan mentioned, when we met with Dan Scollin, he seemed receptive to that. We haven't seen anything since. But that is, I think, something that the board should consider in the future as well, and if we have that opportunity for the DNR to remove those and to give that responsibility just to the board.
Yeah, and I think you, Mr. Chair, brought it up earlier. Maybe it was last summer, but it's hard when we have to contravene what the DNR says, basically, because technically by manipulating these dock lengths, if it's not specifically authorized in the DNR permit, then we're essentially authorizing beyond it, which is what we keep telling the applicants that we can't do. So it'd be nice to kind of claw that back, because that's one of the few things that does fluctuate for us, right? Is having to make those calls of going out, 400, 500 feet. So
Right.
Anyway, it gets rid of a little bit of incongruity.
Say that again, Chris?
No, it just stops the spin of that
Oh, sure.
argument where we go in circles, and it's, this gets everybody in line, and then we're the approver, and
We work a lot faster than the DNR.
Well, I think
and
we've
so
been
there aren't
showing-
emergency,
Yeah.
permit modifications like you can do, because you address them every year. So
and I think we've shown this year, we've gotten process in place where we can be flexible, we can go up, down, where it's like, we have our stuff, let us manage it and do it.
Okay, Sherry, are you comfortable with the motion?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
So the motion, I think, is for the Conservation District Board to provide comments to the DNR that the two of them, one is to memorialize the ADUA line between Lions Park and Docks White Bear, and the second is to remove the configuration from the DNR permit and allow the Conservation District Board to work with the marina owners on configuration.
Yes, I have that, and I'll make that comment.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Okay, that passes.
Great.
Oh, I'm sorry,
No,
Chris.
you go ahead. I just want to make sure you're good.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Next one on the list, Snyder Bay Beach Club. No changes last year, or it's the same permit as last year, no changes, no complaints. So I'd like to make a motion to approve Schneider Bay Beach Club for permit for 2025.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Snyder Bay. Any discussion?
I'd just like to mention that I will be abstaining because this is my
Oh.
organization.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes.
Next on the list, Brenda Farrell. No change, same as last year. No complaints from last year. Would like to make a motion to approve Brenda Farrell's boat or dock permit for 2025.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the Brenda Farrell application. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes.
And then we took Wildwood Beach banner on there off. We're skipping that one for now. We got some work there. Red Path Willamette Water Ski Course. It was the same two ski course setup where they rotated around the lake. I think I think it's been managed fairly well. There's always been some maybe chatter every once in a while, but I think it's been a good thing. LUC approved it, and so I'd like to make a motion to approve the Wolgamont ski course for 2025.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? And I'll just ask, did we get any complaints on this one this year?
No.
Got it.
I mean, it was like, I think the biggest thing we ever get is like, oh, it hasn't moved in 2 weeks, but he's been super good about
But
it.
yeah, I think this year we didn't get any. I don't recall any.
Not that I know of.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. Any questions for Chris? Okay, thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Moving on to the Lake Education Committee. Scott?
Yes. The next thing is that we are finishing up our publication with Laker by the end of the year. We need to get some stuff written by Thanksgiving-ish, so they can have what they need by the end of the year, which will be published about the first of the year. And then the next one won't be till like Memorial Day. So that's what we're working on now. And the next thing after that will be the lake cleanup. If you can think past the winter to early March. And we haven't started organizing that. That's all I have. And then Meredith?
So this month on our social media, I plan to put the lake level and temperature up. I'm going to put something about the Phragmites treatment. Unfortunately, our applicator didn't communicate well about when the treatment was. I tried to get it up ahead of the treatment, but that wasn't possible this time. So I'm just going to put the treatment was done. I'm going to start some education on salt since we're approaching winter, and I'm going to put up something about people that plan to use aeration devices in the lake to contact us. Does anyone have any questions for Scott or me?
Okay, thank you, both. And now we're on to Treasurer's Report. Mike?
Treasurer's report. I would like to make a motion that we accept debit card number 2024-19 and checks number 4983 through 4990.
Second. So we have a motion and a second to approve the Treasurer's Report. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Any questions for Mike? Okay, thank you, Mike. Board Council Report, Alan?
Chair, managed to get a hold of both of our enforcement agents, Matt from the DNR, our conservation officer, as well as Mike, who you met from Ramsey County Water Patrol. Pretty slow, just like the rest of the season, so it looked like a pretty orderly exodus to the extent people have even gotten boats out because it's been so nice. A lot of people are still using the lake. And Matt cites the usual violators, which are people on tillers fishing. Yeah. So very calm summer and nothing in terms of safety infractions or any of the other things that we were asking them to watch out for. And rumor has it that patrol was a little tough just because staffing for everybody has been hard. So there might be a little bit of a kickback in terms of dollars. So whether or not that gets applied next year to the general cost, or if we can just ask for supplemental patrol on some of what Macomas called those busier peak times. Stay tuned, because of course, no one's budget is done. The year ends aren't really out yet, so we don't know, but that'll be coming up probably before the end of the year. So, any questions or concerns I can pass on to them?
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Good, thanks.
Announcements?
Just to say that, reminder that our next board meeting, and it's the last one of 2024, next month, will be held on Tuesday, November 19th.
Okay, thank you. So we're at item 12 on the agenda, adjournment. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, thanks, everybody, for coming out.
Thank you.